Hi there, I'm Mark Isero, and this is Article Club, where we read, annotate, and discuss one great article every month on race, education, or culture. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and I hope your August is progressing restfully. This month, we have been focusing on a beautiful piece that was published earlier this year in Notes from the Undrowned. It is by Saint Trey W, and it is titled, They Burn Books to Burn Us Too. I was honored when Saint Trey W generously said yes to being interviewed for his piece, and I'm excited to let you know that our very own Sarai Bordeaux, Poet Laureate of Eureka, California, who has been an Article Club collaborator for many years, graciously agreed to be in conversation with Saint Trey. The result is a wonderful discussion among two brilliant writers, two brilliant thinkers, two brilliant people. It was an honor for me to be the first listener of this. And so now I'm happy to say you get to listen too. All right, let's get right into this conversation with Saint Trey W and Sarai Bordeaux.
I just want to say, first of all, I know we're here to discuss the article, and by extension, we'll be listening to it in Article Club. But just as a person like me, Sarai, I really needed these works, and I could cry about it right now. So I just want to tell you, for folks listening, full transparency, I'm in a state, and we all are. The world is really doing its big one right now, and so these works really hit me on a personal level. In addition to wanting to speak about them in this interview, I just want to say that. So thank you so much. I'm Sarai. Mark and I have been doing this article club. Well, it's Mark's project, but he's been so gracious to allow me to interview folks and be around and be a part of this beautiful thing. So I'm in Southern California right now, but I live in Eureka, California. But yeah, just to introduce myself a little bit, and then get into it. Is there anything that you would want to say to introduce yourself?
I think I just want to introduce myself. I'm Saint Trey. That is a pseudonym, by the way. It's not my giving name, but it's the name I write under. I chose it because it's honoring my grandmother, my paternal line, which I didn't really have. I didn't really have a lot of time with them growing up. My dad was incarcerated. My grandmother, she was there, but I just didn't really have much time to really get to know them. But in sort of the last few years, my aunt has sort of taken on this role of family griot, and she's given me all the stories about, my grandfather, who I never got a chance to meet, but he died in 2005. My dad, who, we had a rocky relationship due to him being incarcerated. I didn't really understand what that meant as a child, but once I started to form a politic and understand the forces that contributed to him being incarcerated, started to give him a lot more grace. And he passed away in 2017 from a car accident. But I just wanted to use these names to honor him. His name was Ray. My grandfather's name was also Ray. They wanted to name me Ray, so I would have been Trey, the third Ray. They had this whole thing that my aunt told me about. And the Saint part comes from my grandmother, who always would tell me, I don't know if I always liked it because my cousins probably would get jealous. I have 20 and 27 first cousins on my dad's side. So she would say, out of all my grandchildren, you were a saint. You're like a saint. And every time she would see me, and this is a woman who us like a sailor.
Yeah.
I mean, just there was a certain level of gentleness that she had with me. She's also since transitioned, but this is my way of honoring them, that part of the family, because they are very special to me. And while I did not have a lot of time to spend with them, I feel like through story and through time with my aunt and those that are here, I get to, still remain close to them. And this is just a way to honor them. So that's a little bit on me. I'm from New York. I live in Brooklyn. Born and raised here. I've spent time in the South. I also lived in LA for a year. A fun time. Also lived in New Orleans. But yeah, I guess I would just say I'm a writer, a poet, a cultural worker, a dreamer, a friend, a son, a brother, so yeah.
Oh, what a beautiful introduction. Sometimes when you get the bio from folks, it's but the connections that you just wove there were so beautiful. And honestly, like that is something that really drew me to the piece. Not just the one about books that we're discussing, but also your piece that Mark had put in the other newsletter around the Stonewall riots and the kind of erasure of that history.
Yeah.
And I always like to ask writers about like a little bit about their process, partially selfishly, because I like to know what gets people's juices flowing. But the
Yeah.
connections that you're weaving throughout this, like, can you tell me a little bit about that process in writing and how kind of that comes to you?
Well, one, I think I've always been a student of history and grade school all the way through undergrad. History was just something I wanted to explore. But also, as I became older, I really became more interested in witness work and, work about grief and work about beauty, to the contradictions of growing up under empire, right?
Mhm.
So I started that with poetry, and I guess my first poems, they weren't trying to impress. I guess I like to say they were just trying to breathe. I go
Mhm.
back and look at them. I'm like, "Whew, boy,
Yeah.
what was you doing? You was doing something, but you were
Important
doing
though,
something
right?
right." But I also believe that too, like a large part of writing is really remembering, right? It's
Mm,
grieving, it's to unlearn, forgetting, and it wasn't so much about being a writer, it was about not being erased. And I needed proof that I had lived through what I had lived through.
mm.
And sometimes I just needed a place to imagine a world I hadn't seen yet.
Wow.
So I guess that's part of my process is really just the work of witnessing and remembering. And I talk a lot with one of my friends, and he always reminds me, he said, whatever work we're in, you know, our chief responsibility is to bear witness.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we really have lost, especially in these times. And such, we live in such an individualistic society where it's me, me, me. You look at our current administration, and they're feeding into that narrative, and people
Mhm.
are really taking it in. We saw that with this last election, right?
Yeah.
And no matter what side you're on, it's all about like me, me, me.
Mhm.
And the work of being a witness and bear witness, I think, is the most important, one of the most important things that we can do today as artists, as just people.
Yeah, I feel that so much. Like I in the space that we're in, and something that I'm struggling with personally is this like concept of isolation, or like I don't want to be out in the world until I feel a little bit better. And so like what happens to the witnessing, and in turn how that witnessing impacts what you're able to grow through, the knowing that you're not alone, the knowing that people have kind of, as you expressed in the piece, like we've gone through this before, our names are written in stone, like the isolation of that and the individualism of that, it overshadows sometimes. And I really appreciate how the piece kind of pointed to that. Even in the title, they burn books to burn us too. Like that jump from the page to us as people being erased, I think in part is done through this like individualism, this like isolation. And I really appreciate how your piece kind of goes through that remembering and goes through ways that people have resisted that. And one of the things that I especially appreciated was the consistent mention of like libraries and the theme of like libraries. And right now, of course, we're seeing, attacks on literacy, attacks on all these different things. You talked about began their slow violence, banning Black authors, cutting Black history units. Can you say a little bit about this like concept? Like, because we can think about libraries as physical places. You talked about people as libraries, histories as libraries. We talk about our elders as libraries. Um, Talk to me
Yeah.
about.
I so one of my inspirations too for that sort of refrain of like the continual mention of that was because I have this idea that our ancestors are not just bloodlines, right? They're also our bookshelves. And
Yeah.
I thought back to, people like Toni Morrison, and how she taught me that language can be a spell, it can be a
Mhm.
sword, but it also can be a sanctuary. Reading Beloved, which I mentioned, I think in the beginning, and the bluest eye was the first time I
Mhm.
understood the sacredness of blackness in a way,
Mhm.
especially in its unspoken parts, right?
Mhm.
Her reminding us that, if you are free, then you must free somebody else, right? And I think libraries like are a portal to that, right? James Baldwin, given permission to tell the truth, especially when it burns, right?
Mhm.
This sort of clarity, this heat, this refusal to perform respectability,
Mhm.
and his teaching that moral authority doesn't require approval. Audre Lorde, right, reminding us that silence is not going to protect us,
Right.
right? She made queerness feel like gospel. So the reason I mention libraries is because they're all encompassing of
Mm.
these stories. They're, in a sense, I would say akin to church, right? To those who are believers, right? For me, the way I have reimagined faith in God, right?
Mhm.
Like it
Mhm.
is in language, it is
Mhm.
in words that are passed through vessels, the artists, the writers, the griots,
Yeah.
right? And then even contemporaries like Ocean Vuong and Inez Smith and Aja Monet or Mary Baraka. And there's another guy, W.J. Lofton. They all have showed me that craft and conviction can dance, right? That
Mhm.
words don't have to be soft to be sacred. Um, and I think libraries, they feed us, right? When the world has tried to starve us. And I think
Yeah.
that's one reason because there is knowledge, right? There is power, there is sacredness, there is something deeply holy about those spaces. And once you take those spaces away, you starve the people.
Yeah.
Their ability to learn, their ability to expand, their ability to form a politic that is divorced from whatever the state and whatever propaganda is being forced down their throats. And I think it's even more difficult in this time of social media where
Mhm.
someone in AI, right, where
Mhm.
folks can just put anything out there and folks are just believing it, and I don't know. I got a library card. I
Yeah.
still go to the library to
And
get
how
my
that's like
information. Yeah.
resistance, and
Yes.
not just resistance, like an a
Yes.
conscious effort at that. And I really appreciate that. And what you're talking about like the sacredness and the holiness, you can definitely feel that in your work as well. The connection to the sacred and to the holy. And I feel like when we're talking about literacy, especially in terms of the ways it's been kind of criminalized, you talk about how we've had to kind of like steal it back and the ways in which they're trying to replace it now with nostalgia. I really, 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 because when you think of like religion and nostalgia, you kind of, those kind of feed kind of into each other. People like to put a holy spin on their erasure. So, what you're saying in terms of like maintaining this library space, physical spaces, and emotional spaces, elder spaces, maintaining that is like countering that nostalgia. You
Yeah.
say I like had to put my pen down. They wrote Black excellence out of the record and Black suffering into a footnote. They replaced truth with nostalgia, and nostalgia is the most dangerous kind of lie because it demands to be loved. So when we're thinking about that, like holiness and what you're talking about, you can feel the love in it, right? And we're steadily being stripped away, and that's being replaced with this like nostalgia. And I wondered about that because to be constantly resisting that, and as you say in your piece, it's a risk when you're talking about Steve Biko, and the power of the oppressed mind in the hand of the oppressor. And I
Yeah.
feel like that is something that, because it is a risk at this point. At the end of your piece, you're talking about all these different ways that our resistance, our very existence as queer folks and general queerness is resistance, but that is a huge risk,
Yeah.
right? So when we're thinking about this like holiness and this sacredness that you're speaking to, not everybody right now is like able or willing to take that risk. So what are you thinking about in terms of like moving that a little bit? Because at the end of your piece, you offer many ways that we can start and we can be in it. But sometimes I still find myself, because I'm like, yes, absolutely, da, 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 and I still find myself sometimes like, so like what do you think about this like risk versus like, you know, um like to nostalgia? What do we do?
Yeah, I think honestly, we have to be willing to dream again, right? And one thing, I'm someone with a developing abolitionist politic, right?
Mhm.
I'm not fully there yet, mainly because I do not understand everything.
Mhm.
I'm there, right, at the door, and it's unlocked, but I've not fully gone through yet, and I don't feel fully comfortable going through yet. I want to understand. I need to interrogate and ask questions because in my heart, I believe this, but also in my mind, I want to be able to articulate this in a very clear way, right? To be explained to other people because essentially, when I want to talk about dreaming, I think we have ancestors, right, who dreamed, right?
Mhm.
Who dreamed of freedom, from chattel slavery, or we had ancestors who dreamed beyond Jim Crow, and we had ancestors who dreamed beyond being able to love who they would want to love. And
Mhm.
I think we're not doing that. We're accepting things for as they are, the world as it is. And one of the things I would like to offer us is we can dream, for
Mhm.
these worlds that we want. And then once we are able to dream about them, we are able to build them, right? Because
Mhm.
we're constantly thinking about them. Abolitionists in the 17, 1800s, they didn't rest on their laurels, just saying
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm hoping that one day someone will be nice enough to free the slaves. It's like, no, we have to dream this world possible. We have to work to make it possible, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's really the first thing that we need to do. And I think we have responsibility as artists, to keep pushing for more dreamers, right?
Mhm.
Within our friend groups, right? Within our families,
Mhm.
within those we encounter. When you mentioned isolation, that hit something real for me because I do spend some time in isolation when I'm writing. But before I can spend that time in isolation writing, I need to be amongst people, right? That means I'm walking down the street
Mhm.
and the I don't know, the ancestors, something
Mhm.
holy, the divine just really moves in certain moments. I was walking down my street one day and I saw two women just sitting outside of their apartment building. They were older. It was a hot day. I was hot. I'm pretty sure they were hot. But as I walked by, I spoke to them. I said, hello, how are you? And most people know New Yorkers are generally just we we just move. But I think I have Southern roots running through my blood and
Mhm.
through my bloodline. So there's something a little different. While I'm placed here, I feel like I am a son of the South.
Yeah.
And as I spoke to them, I looked back for a second and I just wondered, right? Like, what are their stories? What are their dreams? What have they endured, right?
Mhm.
What gives them joy? And I feel like that when I'm in a space like that to feel, the by extension, what drives others, it
Mhm.
really helps me to sit down with my pen because Ocean Vuong says something very beautifully in an interview he had with Miss Oprah. Miss Oprah. He said that, I don't want to write about you. I want to write alongside you.
Wow.
And I don't know, I just carry that with me. Just it was I don't know, it was just so beautiful. I had to
That's
stop and
it.
like, yeah, like I almost wept because, it was just yes, that is what I was feeling. I didn't have the language for that, but
Yeah.
it is what I felt. But I think dreaming and dream work is something that we can do. And I know I listed, multiple things like in the essay, but I think dreaming I think it's crucial. It's
Yeah.
the first ingredients, right? When we start cooking food, what is the one of the first things we got to do? We usually have to boil water, right?
Yeah.
To begin. And I think this is that it's sort of that process, right? Like
Yeah.
this is how we get started.
I that is really something because when you're thinking about what Ocean Vuong was saying, like writing alongside you and needing to get out in the world, like, because sometimes that's the first to go, right? It's like, like I don't want to learn about anyone else. Like I can't deal with another thing. Like, and that's what's so interesting about this juxtaposition of like what we need to do versus what they're doing with this book banning, like, or with this book banning and burning and like this erasure is like there's like an insistence that we're not smart enough or that we can't do it in community, that we're not capable. And yet such lengths are gone through to strip us from, these dreaming tools. And they make it seem like it's woo-woo, or they make it seem like, it's like not holy to do so, right?
Uh,
Like not
you know,
holy to exist in a space of community. We know that remembering our own is what will save us, and they know that us remembering our own is what will save us. And that kind of like that's one of the things that hit so hard about the piece, is that sometimes like we're stripped of our like of belief in ourselves to do these things, and the dreaming is the first thing to go. Like, and so you know, as you're expressing and as you're writing these things in your other piece too about the riots, when we're thinking about how different things kind of at a certain point they're completely different than what they actually were and what they actually meant. And I had to mention something because you mentioned like Beyonce, you mentioned Janelle Monáe, we mentioned Oprah. Sometimes, like in the space that we're in right now, sometimes these things that are deeply giving of holiness, they also have this complexity of being tools of sometimes the oppressor. And so that
Yes.
critical thought and that kind of like, we don't even have time or space to think about that because we're so embedded in this nostalgia and we're so embedded in this trying not to be erased, that when we have things to deal with within our own group, like we almost bulk at it. Like I'm down to have conversations all day about Beyonce and propaganda
Listen,
and this, and I want to do that. And but people, it's so busy. Like, oh, like white supremacy. It doesn't have it. Like our world is so vast, and the
yeah,
banning of these books and stuff, it's making it smaller and smaller and smaller, so that we don't have the energy to dream around conversations that will save
yeah,
us. And so
yeah.
that's one of the reasons your piece hit me so hard, is that it just woke something up. Like, girl, not only are you capable, it's part of your legacy to do so. You don't have to be scared of that, because the fear is what that's what the burning of the body is. Like the burning of the book and the burning of the body is. It's an installation of fear. And I see that in
Yes.
your writing. I see that in, you know, the way you go from talking about history to personal experience to poetry, even the annotated bibliography. That was a masterful move. Well, not masterful. I don't, you know, masterful or whatever. It was very like, bam, like at the end, here's the annotated bibliography because these are the books that I read. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
tell me about that. Like, I just poked myself in the eye being so excited because your writing just goes there.
Yeah, I think also too is like I don't want to be a gatekeeper for any of this, right? As well. I think, I shouldn't just be like I love to give you what I have been compelled to give you through the pen. However, I want you to go beyond what I'm saying to go and read these things and form your own opinions, right?
Wow.
Because then, you know, you could have a different perspective on something that could be teaching me, right?
Mhm.
Or someone else that you are in community with. And I think one of the things, like you were just talking about all of those things, like even within community, we have this propensity to want to gatekeep.
Mhm.
And I think this is a time not to gatekeep, right? This is a
Yeah.
time where we should be having a communal mindset of
Yeah.
sharing resources and knowledge, right? So that was the main piece why I did that. And usually, I don't do it with every piece, but there have been a few pieces where I'm like, okay, y'all need to read this. There was a piece I wrote on white women being a foot soldiers of white supremacy. And I was like, okay, like I'm going to get this. And I know the girls are going to be, clutching the
Mhm.
pearls and whatnot. But also read this as well, because I'm not just saying this. This is informed by
Right.
like scholars, like
Mhm.
PhDs and people who have studied this deeply. I'm
Mhm.
a person who just thinks. I'm a person who's experienced. I'm a person who has witnessed. So
Mhm.
these are my thoughts. Even just I think the latest piece. I don't think I did it for the latest piece with President Obama, but
Mhm.
I wrote something about saying why we don't need Barack Obama in this moment, right? And forcing people to really re-examine the narrative that has been created around him, that he was some type of savior for
Yeah.
Black people, for America. It's like, no, he was a continuation of a failed American experiment,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
That has been in practice for over 230 some odd years at this point,
Mhm.
right? Like, let's stop, right?
Mhm.
Is he a night? I'm sure he's an amazing man. I've met him a couple of times, very cordial, funny, and I have nothing wrong with him as a man, but
Mhm.
as a symbol
Mhm.
that we
Of
have
Christian.
created. It's yeah, and I think there's nuance to that. I'm never a person that's just black and white, right? Like it's
Mhm.
we live in gray. Like there's
Yeah.
gray matter like all around us. And I think we should explore that. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm at my parents' house right now, and we have, you know, we're at Barack Obama's first inauguration. Like, I was
Yeah.
there, like crying on the ground, and the older ladies, like in their leopard furs, like, get off the ground, like, this is the moment. And I'm like, okay, like this, like
Yeah.
his symbolism and his legacy is multifaceted. And it's definitely
Yeah.
time for us to be able to discuss the facets that are a continuation of colonialism and white supremacy. Similar to like talking about Beyonce, talking about Oprah, talking about Janelle Monáe. Like
Yeah.
these are all situations that can come to light if we're given the grace to be able to extend, nuance to each other, not necessarily this like nostalgia. And so
Right.
I really, yeah, I those points are so beautifully woven together. And I felt at the end of reading your essay, like not only warmed in my heart, not only like held by the ancestors, definitely calling them into
Um,
this space as well, but I felt like better about like what I'm needing to do, and where I'm needing to go from here. So I really, really appreciate your work and your continued efforts and experience. What's next? What's next for you? What are you thinking about coming up here?
so I just finished my debut poetry collection. So it's 2.5 years of labor, of love. That's finished. So I'm in the process of trying to get that published at the moment. But I do have an essay that I'm working on. I probably will launch it maybe Wednesday
Oh,
of this week and it's exploring American militarism and war. And essentially it was born out of an interview again I watched from Ocean Vuong. Like
Ocean Vuong.
he talked about, how we use this language of violence all the time, like we're killing it.
Mhm.
That's the
Oh yes, yeah,
bomb.
yeah,
Do you
yeah,
remember
yeah.
that interview?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
And
Yeah.
I was like, yes. And something in me, I don't know, I just started scribbling on a paper. And then after that pops up this whole war or military expedition with
Mhm.
Iran and Israel and
Yeah.
America dropping bombs. And like, we don't mind our business.
Not only do we not mind our business, we're actively like getting in the way of people who are like, you're not gonna mind the business, we're gonna mind the business. It's free
Yeah,
Palestine all day. Like in Glastonbury, they just had this Bobby Villain is just on stage and they had censored
I
the
saw
brand
that.
previous, and Bobby Villain gets on stage is like, and that I
Yeah.
feel like is something that your work also evoked is like, we're doing it, you guys are gonna do this, we're gonna do this. And so I
Yeah.
love hearing that you've got a poetry collection coming out. I just recently became the poet laureate of my city in
Oh my
Eureka.
God,
So
congratulations.
I've been having a hard time like telling people about it. Like it's kind of weird how that goes. But even your piece, like I'm like, oh no, this is what I'm doing. Like, like I'm living my best queer life. Like,
Period.
um, so I just really appreciate that. And I love hearing about how things kind of just pop up and extend into something that you can create around.
I think that's like generally like with all like my pieces, right?
Mhm.
It'll either be through conversation, and this is why we cannot be in isolation, right? As
Yeah.
artists, as writers, because I would not be able to just sit here and come up like that's not the type of person I am.
Or it
I
would be
need
like
to,
in a loop. Like you would just be like
yeah,
cycling back
yeah,
around to your same like thoughts that you had a problem with in the beginning.
yep. I don't know. I've tried it before and it just doesn't work. But being in community, questions are asked, right? Where and then
Mhm.
I'm able to interrogate things from the conversation that I have, maybe with the group or person that I'm with. But
Mhm.
oftentimes I'll come back and ponder those things like on my own,
Mhm.
and then it'll happen. Then I'll say to my friend, "Thank you so much for that conversation." My best friend, she said something that has really stuck with me and has sort of been sort of leading me as I one created the poetry collection, but also in a lot of my writing, is that writing like saved me. Have and some of my pieces I talk about the grief that I've experienced, with parents and partner loss. But one of the things she said to me one day, she said, "But you did not let yourself die." And I mean, I was undone in that moment. Like I was like, wow, like yes. And, I don't think she understood the sacredness and
Right.
the power of like those words, right? And that's
Mhm.
why I say like language
Mhm.
is one of the most powerful tools that we have.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did not let myself die.
Bro,
And I think we cannot allow ourselves to die, especially in this time.
especially in this time, like, ooh, it is not an exaggeration to say like there's a little bit of lifeline that you've given as well. And I was
Mm.
expressing this to Mark as well, that by extension, he's always been somebody for me that's like, hey girl, like, do you want to do this? Like, no heavy pressure, no like being rude about it, but like always offering opportunities and always offering, spaces where I wouldn't have maybe had the capacity to go find them on my own. So just like, huge shout out to like supportive friends out there, like
Yes.
that 100% in community, like, because we often talk about, right, like, frustration and awkwardness, like those are the costs of being in community. If we want everything to be convenient and fun and nice, like you're gonna be by yourself, like, and it's gonna be miserable. And sometimes I'm like, oh my God, it took me this long to answer, or it took me this long, but Mark was steadily there, like, hey girl, like, do you
Yeah.
want the, and by extension, like I've gotten to read some beautiful pieces by you, and I've come to know who you are, and this is just has been something for me that, like, again, like in a personal time of growth and kind of like struggle, is so much appreciated, in addition to like your expertise as a writer. So thank you
No
so much
problem.
for the conversation and for your
Yes.
work.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it. And I want to congratulate you again on your new status as poet laureate of Eureka. I would love to read some more of your pieces. So yeah, let's stay
You
in
won't get rid of me
contact.
now I got your email, like.
I'll send you my phone number too.
Is there anything else that you want to
Yes.
mention or say?
I just want to say thank you to you and to Mark and to Article Club for, holding space for me, for engaging with my work. I am so appreciative of this. I started my Substack back in like February because my
Mhm.
friend was like, right, please put this out.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, okay.
Like,
And yeah, oh my God. Yeah, I did it. So I'm so glad that, I'm finding community through this platform. It's beautiful. All the other ones are nauseating
yeah,
because
yeah.
I feel like people just get on there, they're loud and they're wrong, they're big and they're
Mhm.
mad. But here I think there's a certain level of grace and just love, right, that has been extended. And I hope to, return that tenfold.
I want to thank Saint Trey W one more time for generously coming on Article Club and having this conversation. And I want to thank Sarai too for your gloriousness. And thank you too, dear listener, for really taking in this conversation. If you want to join our discussion on August 24th, there's still room. All you need to do is go to highlighter.cc/discussion to sign up. One more time, thank you so much for being part of Article Club, and I hope you have a great weekend ahead.